o'clock. We have a quorum of people. Commissioner Roshan is away, but he is with us via phone. On the screen right now, we have all the possible ways that the public can participate. We are back at the Vets Hall live for the first time in over 2 years. Pleased to see everybody here in person. A few things just for the commissioners, a few of them who are new to this process. Your microphone has a little button in the front of it. When you push that, a green light will come on, and then you know you're live. You'd still need to push that button to communicate with the public so it's heard on TV, and then push it again to turn it off so we don't pick up any ambient noises. It's a little easier to make eye contact and see who has something to say, but I will be calling on each of you for comments, questions, that sort of thing, and to Bill as well. And then, as I said, we have our public participation stuff up on the screen. You can show up in person. There's a few people in our audience. When we do public comment, we will ask for the audience to participate first. Then we will go to whoever might be on the phone or participating via Zoom. I think that's kind of the housekeeping that we will start with. So we have the quorum called to order. We'll start, as always, with a moment of silence. All right, thank you. Next up is Planning Commissioner announcements. Does anybody on the dais here have an announcement? One thing I will say, there is a meeting tomorrow night about the Panorama Drive 61-unit subdivision. It is a meeting that is being held by the applicant for neighbors and any interested parties to participate in. It's from 6 to 7 at Del Mar School in their multi-purpose room, and I believe that's posted on the city website. There's a flyer about it. Commissioners are welcome to attend that just to hear what that project might be about and what public concern might be about.
Susan, I just want to say something.
Go ahead and push your button so you're okay.
Yeah, and I just wanted to thank Scott for sending us the latest version of the Planning Commissioner Handbook, which is a very extensive, basically a little pocket handbook on how to work as a planning commissioner. So I just think it's very comprehensive. And I first read this almost 20 years ago when I got appointed to another city's planning commission, but it was very helpful. So as soon as you can get through that, probably better, especially for the newer planning commissioners. So it'll be very helpful as we move on in the future. Thank you.
Good review.
Oh, it was great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All right, so we will move on to public comment. This is the time for items which are not on the agenda or items which you would like to speak to but cannot stay for or don't want to stay tuned for. And I'm looking in the audience, and it doesn't look like anybody's ready to speak on at this time. And Anthony or Highland, do we have anybody in the queue for general public comment?
Thank you, Chair Stewart. Currently, I do not see any raised hands in the queue.
Thank you. All right, so we're going to move on. Consent calendar. We have the current and advanced planning and processing list, and we have approval for 2 sets of minutes from February 1st and February 15th. Yes, Mike.
Motion to approve consent calendar.
I think we might have a comment first. Okay. Asia? Turn on your...
I just had an edit to the minutes from February 1st. It was really small, but on there it just noted that the commissioners that met had ex parte meetings. That's what it's called. And I was listed it as one, but I did not at that time have.
Okay.
And that's all.
Great, thank you. All right.
Okay, so with that, I will make a motion to approve with the edit that Asia presented.
I will second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in. Do we want to?
We need to do roll call. Yeah.
Let's do a roll call.
Okay. Commissioner Graffia,
Yes.
Commissioner King,
Yes.
Commissioner Roshan,
Yes.
Hi, Bill.
Hi, everybody.
Commissioner Rodriguez,
Yes.
Chair Stewart.
Yes,
Motion passes 5-0. Thank you.
I'm glad, that was a good way to know that it works. Bill was there, yay. Okay. Moving on to our public hearing. This is item B1. The project location is 1260 Main Street, and this is going to be Ms. Hubbard.
Stand by.
Technical
Yes.
challenges. We won't say difficulties, but it's all new still, so.
Okay. This is a public hearing to consider a land use amendment for the property located at 1260 Main Street. The request, which seemed to have come over my writing, is to amend the land use map in the general plan and the local coastal program adopted in 2021, requesting a change from district commercial to community commercial. And this map shows the location of the site on the land use map, and on the side with the designations, it shows the two commercial designations that are being changed for the site. Historic information. This is a picture of the site. You'll recognize it. It's as you're leaving town on Main Street. It's on the right side just after the Masterpiece Hotel before you start going down the hill towards Quintana. The site is 14,810 square feet. It's wedge-shaped with access on Main Street. The SLO County records show that the existing building is 1,409 square feet, and it dates back to 1952. The prior use was a miniature and collectible items retail store. And this is a parcel map that shows, in the center of the map, it shows the subject site. Above that is district commercial. So as most of our zoning and land use designations, they usually are contiguous with other properties with the same designation. So this was contiguous with the district commercial that has access on Quintana, but it's also contiguous with the other properties that are on the bottom of the map, which there's high-density residential on the east and Masterpiece Hotel, and basically most of the uses along Main Street are community commercial. And the main objective of this illustration is to show the steep elevation change between the subject site and the contiguous district commercial sites. This is another image of that difference. You can see on the right, district commercial, and there's a drop off of maybe 15 to 18 feet. The subject property is straight ahead on the left. Another view from Quintana, this shows the Masterpiece Hotel on the top and the subject site to the right of that, and district commercial is down the hill with access to Quintana. This is a view of Quintana looking kind of southeast, and this shows you this configuration of sites is more suited for truck traffic, and it's a more auto-oriented big box type business that can operate on that street. And this is from Main Street. Main Street is all community commercial except that last site, which is the subject of the hearing today. This shows the Masterpiece Hotel, the site beyond the car, and a view looking north on Main Street. In Main Street, really the purpose is less auto-oriented businesses, more walkable shops, restaurants, and retail. So this is an aerial showing the site circled in red, and again the proximity of the district commercial above it, and the community commercial, which is all down Main Street through downtown. So the change would result in this, which just moves that line so that district commercial is now just the uses that are along Quintana, and this subject site would become community commercial, same as all the other businesses that have access on Main. So the process is, this requires amendments to the general plan, local coastal plan, land use plan. It also requires an environmental review, which has been performed, and it's in the form of an amendment to the 2021 EIR, which was part of the general plan, land use plan, coastal, and all those, and there needs to be a short word for that. And the findings were no significant environmental impacts. The land use map amendment requires Planning Commission with a recommendation forwarded to City Council, and that's what we're doing tonight. City Council will then review the project and render a decision on the request for amendment. Amendments approved by City Council are forwarded to the California Coastal Commission for review and certification. And the California Coastal Commission allows 3 amendments to the general plan, local coastal plan per year. And staff recommends that the Planning Commission forward a recommendation for approval to City Council by adopting Planning Commission Resolution 04-22, which includes findings for MAJ 21-006.
Thank you for that very complete report. Any questions from commissioners for staff? Joe? Asia?
Yeah, I'm wondering, it sounds like there's 3 allowed amendments that can take place a year. And I was curious as what the process is for selecting those, if it's first come, first serve, or if there are others in the docket, how that works.
We're allowed 3 amendment opportunities a year, and I'll say it like that because we can process multiple amendments at one time. We do have a few in the pipeline right now, and when we're done through council with this one, it'll probably be paired with another one before we send it off to Coastal Commission. So we are able to sort of put them together and send them off. It's not just one change and that's it. It's just one package at a time. So, because one of the other things we'll be sending them this year is the city's zoning code. And we also have another land use amendment making its way through the process at the south end of town. So.
The other question I had is about spot zoning. And I just wanted to point out and maybe have you explain why this isn't spot zoning, in the sense of like, why does this meet the qualifications for being a legal zoning change versus it being a parcel that, do you know what I'm talking about with spot zoning? I feel like this is sometimes an issue that people bring up.
It is sometimes. This is taking a parcel that is on the fringe of a different zoning classification and just moving it over into that new other zoning classification. So, and making it align with the other uses that are actually along Main. Really, it makes more sense for this zoning, on the property versus the existing zoning that kind of pairs it with properties that are down on Quintana, which makes a little less sense. I think we were just carrying forward the way the previous land uses were in the old cities, in the city's old general plan, local coastal land use plan. Spot zoning is when you take an area, say it's commercial, and in the middle of it you pick a parcel out of it that's like, and put a single family home zoning on it and say, okay, that's just going to be a house, or vice versa. You have a residential area, you take one parcel out of it and you, in the middle of it, say, and make it a commercial designation. And it would be something that would be like a small, like one lot size. It would be a size of one lot. That would be kind of spot zoning. And that is, prohibited by state law, actually. So.
Yeah, and that was a leading question, because I just wanted to point out that for the general knowledge of spot zoning being used as an argument for or against projects in the future, that this is an allowable action because it's a contiguous property or contiguous use. Anyways, thanks.
Thank you. Appreciate that question, because I wondered, gee, we only get 2 more chances to make these changes, so I'm glad to hear that we can group together. Mike, did you have any questions of staff?
Yeah, I just want to make a comment that it was stated that there were no significant environmental impacts, and I was specifically looking for traffic and parking impacts. So on the report, it did state that the vehicular access to the site and the related parking is via a city-maintained alleyway that also provides access to residential units. So I was very happy that we did have, something in place that did not lead to additional environmental impacts. So I was really happy to see that. So I just want to reiterate that staff did make that comment, and we do have something in place.
Great.
Thank you.
And Mr. Roshan, do you have any questions of staff about this project?
I do not. It
Excellent.
looks like it certainly, it seems reasonable, not spot zoning because it's adjacent and contingent,
Great.
contingency. So, yeah, I think it's, I'm ready to make a motion whenever you guys are.
We are going to first open for public comment, and then we will entertain your motions. So, anybody in the audience have public comment on this project?
Hi, Planning Commission. I'm Sean Green from Morro Bay here, and I live a couple blocks away from this particular site. I was surprised that it was zoned district commercial from the get-go, and it makes perfect sense being up there on the bluff to be rezoned community commercial. It's akin to the Masterpiece hotel right next door. It sort of marks the northern end of Main Street downtown as opposed to the beginning of the Quintana commercial district, so it seems like a no-brainer. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Sean. And we have another commenter.
Hello. My name is Steve Allen. Hi, Commissioners. It's very good to see you
Welcome.
back here in person. Hi, Nancy. Hi, Scott. I own and operate the Masterpiece Hotel, and we own 1260 Main Street. 1260 Main, as you know, was the cottage miniature shop. It sat on the market. The nice couple that actually lived there and ran this store, it didn't sell for a long time. We looked at it. We tried to figure out how to make it work. We operate a couple other hotels here in Morro Bay, and the Masterpiece is actually the smallest one, and it's furthest from the water. So no matter how many rooms you still have to have somebody on site. You still have to have a desk clerk. You still have to have housekeeping staff, everything. So it would really, ultimately, if this were approved and we could add a few more rooms and then put our on-site into this property, I think that's our goal here. But it seems to make sense. It looks a lot larger, actually, in this picture than it is. We did a soils test, and it's really an old sand dune. So a lot of it's not usable, and it's going to require, ultimately, a lot of reinforcement of that hillside. So even though it looks a lot larger than it is, it's not as usable as it looks in the picture. So that's all. I thank you for your consideration. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for being here. That raised one quick question before we go to a motion. I assume there's a project in the pipeline, and will we see that project when there's something that actually is ready
Yes,
to
I
go?
think
Yeah.
the discussion so far is using the existing building for a change in use. If there's a change to the building or expansion or new building, it'll come back to you and you'll see it.
Great. Thank you.
And I just want to comment too, Susan, based upon what you're saying and what was said by the public, that, obviously we have the EIR in front of us, but I would assume then when that project comes forward that we would revisit parking and traffic impacts, because especially if we're building a hotel. So all of a sudden we do have impacts. So all I'm saying is we're going and, using the process. This one's first, but if there are additional impacts, those would come to us and we would mitigate those.
Yes, based on the project that's proposed, if there's something that needs further analysis, it would have it.
I do think just having known that little business and the folks that live there, I wouldn't anticipate much greater traffic impact than what they had with customers coming, parking, and then their own, vehicles living there. It's a neat little area.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you're actually going to try and incorporate it and combine it, do something with it that it'll make for a good community improvement. Yeah.
It just occurred to me, and I'd like to encourage the applicant to do whatever he can to actually create a kind of an on-site apartment of sort for your hotel employees, because
Great idea.
we'd like to encourage the service people to be able to live here in Morro Bay.
Mm-hmm. And the last comment I'll make is,
Okay.
I didn't want to engage the applicant, the public commenter at this point, but I'd say that, so if we do add additional parking, that I would hope that we would consider EV charging stations. Continue to consider those, since that's the trend in California. Mm-hmm. So if that happens to occur, if we need more parking, then we should probably think about that. Again, we're getting ahead of
way
ourselves a
beyond
little,
the scope
but that's it.
But appreciate, it's good to stick in
Give
somebody's.
give that public comment or something to think about.
Yeah. All right, so let's get a motion going. Bill, are you still interested in making that motion?
I am. So I would like to make the motion that we accept staff's recommendation. And I do that with enthusiasm. I think it's a good move.
Second?
All right, we have a motion and a second. Nancy, would you like to do the honors?
Yes. Commissioner Roshan,
Yes.
Commissioner Graffia,
Yes.
Commissioner Rodriguez,
Yes.
Commissioner King,
Yes.
Chair Stewart.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks to Mr. Allen for coming out and Mr. Green for his comments. We have
Chair Stewart, this is Anthony
Yes.
from AGP Video. I just wanted to put it out there. There were no raised hands in the queue during public comment of that last
Perfect.
item as well.
Okay, thank you. New business, there is none. We will move on to item D, unfinished business. This is the review of the Public Benefits Subcommittee report. We will review the report, discuss, and provide direction to staff on next steps. Our subcommittee members are all here. That was Commissioner Ingraffia, Commissioner Rodriguez, and Member at Large Sean Green. So, and then Scott, did you want to introduce this, or?
I wasn't going to say much more than you just did. I was just
Okay.
going to remind you that if we formed the subcommittee, note the members, which you did, and turn it over to them. So I think you're good.
Okay, excellent. Sorry, I rained on your parade.
It's all good.
Okay.
All right. Planning commissioners and Scott and Nancy and the general public who are following along at home. Happy to be here in person presenting this item that feels very important to the public long term. And I'm excited to begin the Planning Commission Subcommittee report for the Public Benefits Subcommittee that was made up of Commissioner Rodriguez, Commissioner Ingraffia, and myself, Sean Green. After I speak, then I envision Joe having some comments and Mike having some comments, and then bring it to I guess, public comment as well, and planning commissioner discussion. What actually comes out of today's meeting will be totally open-ended, and we'll see kind of where it goes. So the background of the Public Benefits Subcommittee, this came up after a number of years and a number of projects in planned development zones here in town that were requesting modifications of city standards. And anytime that happens, there's a trigger that requires the applicant to achieve greater than normal public benefit in order to be considered for those modifications of city standards in planned development zones. And so historically, staff has been put in a very challenging position to sort of, on a case-by-case basis, present some kinds of public benefits like maybe EV charging stations, as was mentioned before, maybe bike lane improvements, certain sidewalk improvements that are separate from the ones that are normally required from a development project. And over a course of negotiations and sort of back and forth between staff and the applicant that didn't have prescriptive guidance, eventually a project comes in front of the Planning Commission with some loosely defined set of public benefits, generally that staff has deemed significant enough to at least to be presented to council to Planning Commission for Planning Commission's consideration. And so the Public Benefits Committee subcommittee was sort of initiated as an attempt to clarify what public benefits are, to sort of streamline the process of public benefits and eliminate a lot of the confusion around what a modification of city standards is and how greater than normal public benefits can be achieved to offset that modification. And I'm getting a little deep here. If you're following along at home, I'm just sort of going page by page and hitting some of the highlights, and we're still in the background for the committee. There are other terms separate from public benefits that are sometimes used, whether it's around Morro Bay or in other jurisdictions, terms like community benefits, and then terms like variances, which is a little bit different than a modification of city standard. I don't want to get bogged down too much in the legalese, but generally speaking, our subcommittee sat down to determine what we're currently doing regarding public benefits and what we could be doing in the future that may help applicants, that may help staff, that may help the Planning Commission, that may help council, all sort of get on the same page about what's expected from applicants, and so that they deliver the kinds of things that advisory boards expect and that the public appreciates. Okay, so that's sort of where we started. There is some language in the existing code, 17.40.30.d, that says modifications of city standards shall only be approved upon a finding that greater than normal public benefit may be achieved by such deviations. Such benefits may include, but are not limited to, improved or innovative site and architectural design, greater public or private usable open space, and provisions of housing for the elderly or low moderate income families, provision of extraordinary public access, provision for protecting environmentally sensitive habitats, but in all cases, these provisions shall meet the coastal land use policies. So there does exist a little bit of language regarding public benefits, and it is philosophically what we were shooting for as a subcommittee already. Okay, so Commissioners Ingrafia, Rodriguez, and myself met a total of 6 times over the past year, about the past 9 months, including one Planning Commission meeting on February 15th, 2022, at which this public benefits process was sort of preliminarily discussed. And the Planning Commission explicitly asked for more of the underlying logic and how process-wise this could play out in the future, assuming that folks were on the same page about this process. So the subcommittee sat down and identified a number of case studies to look at to start us off and get the ball rolling. If you're following along, it's on page 3. We created 3 zones per se. And this is all sort of unofficial. These are our own categories of zones. And if you're looking at zones A, B, and C, A is the waterfront, which is a planned development zone. B is sort of the former Morro Bay Power Plant and vicinity. And then C is the Atascadero Road, Highway 41 corridor, all of which represent planned development overlays that could be impacted by the public benefits process. Looking specifically at some case studies within those zones, along the waterfront, we looked at 833 Embarcadero, which is under construction right now. That's the building, the under the sea building that was recently leveled and is moving forward with their project. We found in that particular project, which is a pretty significant waterfront project, that a number of public benefits were included in that application that was eventually approved by the Planning Commission and Council. Some of those public benefits that were included in 833 Embarcadero, I should say that they were required to include greater than normal public benefit as a result of building higher than 17 feet on the waterfront. Our local coastal program, Downtown Waterfront Strategic Plan, General Plan, all reference a specific chart that requires waterfront properties of a certain width, in their case greater than 50 feet, to provide significant public benefit in exchange for building higher than 17 feet up to the maximum 25 feet, which is what they did. Some of the public benefits that they included were improvements to the harbor walk connectivity, significantly expanded harbor walk width, an additional 5-foot vertical access way. They're including some cultural historical signage. There's a children's playground on site. There is additional public seating, and there are public restrooms, okay, which are all in the ballpark of the kinds of public benefits that the public certainly benefits from, sort of more than offsetting the height, exceeding the height in that particular zone. In our subcommittee, Zone B, we looked at the Vistra property and potential projects that could appear there. What we as a subcommittee decided is that we wouldn't dig too deep into that particular parcel or potential project at this time, though we anticipate, or at least the Planning Commission anticipates, discussing something in or around that vicinity in the near future. It probably should be noted that Council does have a 2-member subcommittee dealing with the Vistra project. I believe it's Mayor Heading and Councilmember Addis, who are in talks with Vistra generally. To what degree that addresses public benefits, I'm not sure. Maybe not at all. And that's something that will be up for a Planning Commission discussion moving forward, how and to what extent you want to be involved in that public benefits discussion. And then in Zone C, which was the Highway 41 Atascadero Road corridor, we looked at a recently approved 83-room hotel project that's currently under construction that is between Highway 1 and the high school. I'm sure you've all seen it if you've driven by. That particular project at 295 Atascadero Road, requested a modification of city standards. It's typically maximum 30 feet height in that area, and they requested to build to roughly 35 feet. And in exchange for that requested modification of city standards, they included some improvements to pedestrian safety, bicycle parking, and included some public EV charging stations there. To what degree the subcommittee felt that was appropriate, as a sort of up for debate. Those items are in the ballpark of public benefits. Are they equivalent or more to offsetting that height modification? That's the kind of thing that the Planning Commission will need to discuss moving forward, and how best to sort of quantify the value of these rather abstract public benefits. So the subcommittee then looked at what other jurisdictions are doing regarding public benefits, and that some are increasingly developing processes for this process to take place, for the public benefits review to take place. There is one particular Diet and Bhatia report in the city of Redwood City up north that asks the following questions. How will the relative value of benefits be calculated? How will the benefits be prioritized? And who will decide? Which are some of the same questions that we'll eventually face as well. The subcommittee found that, figured we're still in the early enough stages that we don't need to explicitly address those questions, but they're worth throwing out there. Also cited in that same report was the city of Emeryville, California, which actually categorized the kinds of public benefits that may be incorporated into a future list or menu that we could provide to applicants. And their categories were public open space, sustainable design, alternative energy, water efficiency, and a flexible public benefit, which is basically a catch-all, miscellaneous, everything else to be decided upon by the Planning Commission on a case-by-case basis. So the subcommittee then transitioned from this sort of case study into a general discussion of any plan development applicant that could come forward in the future. And from that discussion, there were a number of four considerations to be specific, that needed additional specificity and attention and discussion from Planning Commission probably as well. And those appear on page 8, items 1 through 4. We think we need to determine what the triggering mechanism is for a public benefits review. Right now, and this could very well stay as is. Right now, if we have a plan development zoned applicant who is requesting a modification of city standards, it triggers a public benefits review. Okay. Item number 2, we need to look at the project size, scope, or other determining factors to see if, in fact, we need different processes or pathways for projects of different sizes or scopes. Item number 3, we might need to look at the size, scope, or nature of the requested modifications, which would be a sort of a different way to approach the same issue. And then we have item number 4, what might public input opportunities look like if they were specific to public benefits? And so I'm just briefly going to mention some of the highlights from each of those points. I already mentioned that the current triggering condition for a public benefits review is a plan development zoned applicant requesting modifications of city standards no matter what size project or what size modification. Item number 2, the project size, scope, or other determining factors. Like, how do we decide what projects are let's say, hugely important versus immaterial, and we don't need to have this discussion at all. And so what the subcommittee looked at, we first came up with these categories, basically just called small, medium, and large for the sake of argument, for the sake of discussion. And then we took a closer look, like what kinds of projects felt small, medium, or large before we even looked at the square footage or anything like that. And in the small category, we had projects, somewhat recent projects like Gray's Inn, Kayak Shack renovation. We have the 3 Stacks remodel of the aquarium building that didn't come to Planning Commission, but is a recent thing. And then there was a Salt Building 571 in Embarcadero, like vacation rental unit with a lift. Those were considered small waterfront projects that were in PD zones. Then in terms of medium-sized projects, Rose's Landing, the Landing at Morro Bay, which is a new building up in Measure D area, and then the 833 Embarcadero project that I just mentioned felt, subjectively like medium-sized projects. And then potential large projects, none of these 3 are actual projects yet, but we tried to think of the kinds of large-scale projects that may significantly impact the city. When and if something ever happens at the Vistra property, it feels like a large project. A year or 2 ago, I think there was some very long-term talk of potential housing at Morro Bay Elementary, which felt like a pretty significant large project. And then the city currently has up for sale the Market Plaza area, which has a few parcels right in the downtown waterfront corridor that does feel like a large project that would significantly impact the public. If you're looking at page 10, how we define small, medium, large, certainly up for discussion. Would love to hear from the planning commissioners, certainly the general public eventually, or even now, about what that means and if that's the best way to categorize projects. If we looked at building size, we just threw out some numbers as a starting point. Perhaps a small project is a building less than 7,500 square feet, and this is relative to Morro Bay. Obviously, this is not going to be a small, medium, large project in San Jose or LA. A medium-sized project, perhaps 7,500 square feet to 15,000, and then perhaps a large-scale project, 15,000 square feet, building square feet or greater. We also mentioned lot size and or valuation of a project, but those felt a little bit harder to determine and or were less indicative of the significance of a project, so we left it at building square footage for now. Item number 3 at the bottom of page 10, the subcommittee then looked at the size, scope, or nature of requested modifications, which turned into a bit of a black hole. The kinds of modifications that could be requested by an applicant are pretty infinite, and so to come up with process that was tied to the nature or significance of a modification felt a lot harder to pinpoint, even though the underlying logic does remain that we want to more than offset those requested modifications. So definitely open for ideas there in terms of how we quantify the significance of a requested modification of city standards. Is it a percentage? Is it a numeric value? Is it a small, medium, large type scale? And then lastly, and perhaps most importantly from a process standpoint, what exactly might public input opportunities look like specific to public benefits? The subcommittee wants applicants to have all the tools necessary to come forward with projects that the public loves and can appreciate. The subcommittee wants applicants to feel like the process is streamlined. And in fact, the Community Development Department and the Planning Commissioners have also established a planning review subcommittee that also seeks to make easier and more streamlined the planning review process. And so when our subcommittee mentions something like public input opportunities specific to public benefits, it is not the intention to create greater barriers or greater layers, but instead an opportunity to clarify what all parties sort of expect or would like to see. And much like that panorama applicant or meeting that was already mentioned, the public forum at Del Mar, which I think was coming up here for a completely unrelated project, that applicant it appears seems to proactively be seeking the public's input so that they can incorporate the public input into potential projects moving forward. And that seems like a really ideal scenario for all parties. So public input opportunities specific to public benefits, what might that look like? And I'm just going to present some things that the subcommittee talked about in these regards. So for small projects, there doesn't seem to be a need for any additional public input opportunity above and beyond the Planning Commission and or council hearings that currently exist. And so in our early talks, that seems to be the case, sort of a consensus among the subcommittee members that no additional public input opportunities beyond what we have right now feel necessary. Whether that's the case for a medium-sized project, that might be up for discussion as well. Certainly a large project that could, for decades or centuries, impact the entire city and its populace beyond us here in this room, feels the need, sort of begs additional public input opportunities, whatever that may look like. And so what these public input opportunities might look like, and I'll skip ahead to page 14. The subcommittee came up with a sort of pathway approach. Again, this is still entry level or preliminary discussions subject to the Planning Commissioner's feedback, but a pathway approach that takes small, medium, large projects and immediately, once those projects in planned development zones request a modification of city standards, would sort of initiate a process depending on the size or scope of that project. If you are if you are a small project and you are in a planned development zone and you request a modification of city standards, then you enter planning review just as you do now, and you go through the normal Planning Commission hearing and get approved or denied based on the public benefits that you provide, and Planning Commission's determination of whether that's significant enough to offset that requested modification. A medium-sized project, and this is what the subcommittee came up with, A medium project, because it plays a much more significant role to the general public and the neighborhoods that it could potentially impact, a medium project, and we're at the bottom of page 14, would the city would publish a 30-day window of public input opportunity specific to public benefits early in the process, so that the applicant would have every tool at their disposal for incorporating the kinds of public benefits that people in that neighborhood or in the city in general would love to see, and therefore be able to incorporate those suggested public benefits or others that they come up with into their in-progress plan review before it appears to the in front of the Planning Commission. Far less guesswork being done by staff or applicants or any of that. And the subcommittee felt that that was a nice way to streamline the process and give the applicant all the tools necessary to incorporate some of the public's input beyond the hearing that is pretty late in the game. And then for large projects, you see there's a bit of a stacking going on. So small projects, just as is right now, medium projects as is, plus a 30-day window for public input opportunities. And then our last suggestion was for large projects to have so again, this is probably projects over 15,000 square feet or whatever we determine. The city schedules a public forum to present the project and solicit public comment. So this is early in the process. Then number 2, city publishes a 30-day window at or around that particular forum to allow public input opportunities, not just at the forum, but also in the 30-day window. And then the applicant can incorporate public feedback from the public forum and from the 30-day window into their project that will then later appear in front of the Planning Commission and eventually Council, because it's a large project. And so those are some of the suggestions by the subcommittee in terms of process and what that might look like. From there, and why I leave this to the end, is that at the February Planning Commission meeting, there was a push from planning commissioners to discuss more of the underlying logic and philosophy behind a public benefits menu, which is how the process sort of started out, was this public benefits menu. And so much of what I just discussed there as part of this report is what the subcommittee actually did at our 6 meetings, and we revised. We came up with different pathways that did or didn't feel like they were working. We narrowed it down to more or less what I just presented, and that's all in advance of creating a public benefits menu of sorts, which, in discussing with community development and current and past planning commissioners, basically is a list of public benefits that the public likes, generally speaking, that can be handed over to any applicant that is required to provide public benefits. So if I have a project in a planned development zone and I know that I'm requesting to go over the maximum height by 9 inches because of the way the bluff is on my property or whatever, I know that that's going to trigger a public benefits review. If my project is small, it's sort of the process that we have now, plus the addition of this useful public benefits menu, so that I can proactively propose projects that are going to hold weight, that are going to look good for community development staff, that are going to look good for planning commission, that are going to look good for the general public. So what is this menu, and what does it look like? It is, I wouldn't call it a finished product by any stretch of the imagination, but starting with the categories of other cities, the subcommittee first looked at, we said, do we need to categorize our list at all? Eventually, I think we probably do, for the sake of organization. It's like if you opened a menu at a restaurant and you want to find salads, you look for the word salad and then you find a list of salads. So something like that could eventually be useful. And the subcommittee first looked at the different departments that we have here in town: community development, public works, parks and rec, public safety, finance, harbor, and tourism. And we use those as a starting point, but they didn't feel quite right, in part because lots of the public benefits that we were brainstorming or that the public had contributed felt like public works type items. They just happened to work out that way. And so our next categorization on page 16 looked like the following: beautification and signage, history and culture, pedestrian and bike, transportation and parking, utilities and services, harbor, and tourism and economic development. The subcommittee did want to make a point of addressing tax revenue as a greater than normal public benefit. Whether or not that's been allowed or encouraged in the past, at least our subcommittee was in unanimous agreement that increases to taxation in the normal course of business, like increases like city contributions of TOT or sales tax revenue or increases in property tax in the normal course of business. That's really the expectation of any commercial property. And so at least our subcommittee felt that any proposed commercial development that positively impacts city collection of TOT, sales tax, property tax, or other fees should not receive consideration for providing significant public benefits simply by conducting their proposed business in a way that any such business would normally be conducted. And that's actually a legacy suggestion from former Planning Commissioner Robert Teft, who felt pretty strongly about that as well, among others. What are the last few things that I wanted to mention here? The Planning Commission at our February 15th meeting did mention words like mitigation, proportionality, and nexus as sort of a philosophical into this public benefits discussion. Philosophically, our subcommittee did look at mitigation of potential. Let's say there's a pretty aggressive height request for modification. The applicant proposing potential public benefits in or around the idea of height or beautification or view shed or something like that felt like a great place to start, though we didn't have any prescriptive rules for what exactly that meant. Proportionality is a fancy way of saying that any proposed public benefits should certainly be relative to the size and scope of the project and or the size and or the scope of the requested modification of city standards. I guess I'll read a few items off of the public benefits menu as they currently look, just to give you some ideas of the kinds of things that our subcommittee talked about. Installation of public restrooms, installation of historical or cultural signage, educational signage, added street lighting, crosswalks, bicycle or pedestrian safety, intersection improvements, and again, these are all above and beyond the normal curb gutter and sidewalk and other required improvements. Public parking repairs, teen center repairs, public seating. You kind of get the idea of the kinds of things that could be proposed. There could be other more abstract public benefits like gifts of land, rezone, I'll leave it at that. The possibilities are pretty endless about what kinds of public benefits could be proposed, and we'd love more feedback from not just the Planning Commission but the general public at some point in terms of the kinds of items that could appear on a public benefits menu. Again, the end goal of the menu itself is to have it be a nice package that could be handed over to any development applicant who's entering the process of public benefits review, no matter what that kind of review looks like. Even if it was under what our current process looks like, it will still be very beneficial to applicants and to staff. We're certainly thinking of staff as well. They are spread thin, and anything to ease their burden, time and effort-wise, to reduce the need for negotiations, to reduce the need to answer questions, is certainly going to be a good thing, though I'm sure they remain happy and willing to do that for all applicants. So the next steps here, after meeting, we're looking at page 20. The Planning Commission, among other things, might want to discuss whether or not building square footage and small, medium, and large feel like the appropriate triggering mechanisms or language for this type of discussion. It would be useful to hear the Planning Commission talk about whether or not they like this pathway or pipeline approach to different size projects. Certainly, we could keep a sort of case-by-case or catch one-size-fits-all type approach like we currently have. Love to hear Planning Commission talk about the public benefits menu and what you'd like to either see on it or what shape or form you think it should take. And then perhaps a brief discussion of financial contributions versus physical improvements that the public can see and touch. Anyway, so that wraps up my end of the subcommittee report. I feel honored to be part of it. I'm not on the Planning Commission. I'm like what am I, a Planning Commission fanboy here? I am on the Harbor Advisory Board. I am on the Harbor Advisory Board, though I don't speak for the Harbor Advisory Board here. I do believe, this is just me speaking, that the Harbor Advisory Board would love to participate in this process to some degree, as I would suspect that many advisory boards would as well. So we're hoping to get the ball rolling and make this a real thing. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that comprehensive report. And just per your last comments, I think it actually would be really interesting to see what the other advisory boards might come up with in terms of their suggestions for public benefit, because they are coming at things from very different places, but it is all about development in our community. So first, let's just see, Joe, did you have anything to add to that report? And first we'll do that, then we're going to do public comment, and then we're going to do discussion.
Not surprisingly, I do have a few things to
Okay.
add. First, the obvious, much thanks to Sean for his outstanding work, who did the lion's share of this, and without whom we would not have this report, literally, and for the current summary that you just gave, which was very, very thorough. And I think it proves without doubt that this document, however it is modified or revised by this board, is going to provide a really useful framework and a guideline for discussions about community benefits, both by us and by the City Council. So what I thought I would do is just kind of emphasize a couple of things that are particularly important to me, and I think they were important to the subcommittee as well, and see what the Planning Commission thinks of that. There are certainly a lot of people in the community who are very much aware of the larger development projects that are making their way through the process. But again, we were careful in that these projects are in the very early stages of negotiation, and we didn't want to complicate things, to say nothing of jeopardizing the negotiations, and also being aware that very often in these kind of real estate transactions, confidentiality is an essential element. So, but that being said, with respect to these large projects, we did want to sort of alleviate any concern on the part of the public that there might not be sufficient time when the time became appropriate to talk about community developments, that things had sort of, they might have gone too far along in terms of completion without the community development input from the various bodies. So we're hoping that the commission will figure out a recommendation to pass along, I guess, to the City Council in terms of, what a framework, what a framework for periodic updates on some of these very large project proposals are, so that we in turn can sort of get up to speed in terms of thinking very specifically for these kinds of projects, which are going to be so influential of what happens to Morro Bay for decades, literally. And the other point of emphasis for me, and again for the subcommittee, was in terms of public input for these large projects. It's one thing to say, because it concerns so many people and will take and will be so influential for so many years, that the public should have input. But what does it really mean? I mean, do we have a series of meetings? Is there a survey? Do we poll people? Do we have listening sessions? All that, to try and get specific as to what the process might be for this enlarged input by the community. And then the other thing, the last point that I wanted to emphasize is, it's all fine and good to say that any community benefit should be commensurate with the value and size of the project. But again, that at best is a kind of a nebulous term. What does it mean to be commensurate? I mean, does it mean simply a framework of a percentage of the value of the project? And is it the value of the project when it's built, or the value of when it's online, or sometime in the future? Or is there a more elaborate kind of formula or a flexible formula that we should be thinking about to sort of flesh out what we mean by commensurate? And then, finally, I would say that this document, the hope of the subcommittee was that this document, in keeping with some of the other large documents we've had, like the zoning revision and the Morro Bay plan, we would discuss this at more than one meeting. I mean, take the document home, read it several times, think about it, bring your ideas, and so that we have a real collegial input into this document before we bring it forward and recommend it to the City Council. Those are my thoughts.
Yeah, and strategizing for this meeting, I'll just pick up where Joe left off, which is that it took us a while to get here. 6 meetings. So we would not expect that the Planning Commission would be able to turn this around in one night. That's not the expectation because, there's a lot there. So, the primary goal and objective was to present this report tonight, and we did that. Thank you, Sean, again. I like to use analogies, but I guess a good carpenter knows where his good tools are at, right? So Scott gave us the first version of the American Planning Association handbook or magazine. But the American Planning Association prioritizes and recognizes that a public benefits program is essential in the overall planning process. This is one of our tools. And we should be looking at public benefits. Some cities are way ahead of the game. Some cities are somewhere in the middle, and some cities are getting started with public benefits. Go to the largest cities, and you'll find the largest public benefits program, as was stated by both Joe, I think, and Sean. Number 2, the Planning Commission handbook, and I think one of the things we wanted to emphasize is, as one of the top 5 things a good planner does, is a good planner engages the community. And that'll be right as one of the top 5 things. So we were trying to figure out, okay, especially on the larger projects, there's got to be an engagement of the community. Again, Joe has said it, Sean has said it. So we were thinking about time, process, and how we could help council and staff in doing this work. And again, that's the role of a planning commissioner. So I'm not giving us a work. That's what we should be doing anyway. That's right in your handbook. It'll be number 5. And that's for specifically for Asia, because I know she was looking forward to getting the information. And number 3, we're in the process of establishing some new guidelines, zoning guidelines. So how would those all come together? So we didn't ask that question, but I'm going to ask it now. While we were doing this, we kind of talked about it, but it would be nice as we're doing that if we could kick off a public benefits program that works together with all of the other things we're trying to do at the same time. And I think most zoning guidelines for most cities do recognize the fact that a public benefits program is essential in its overall job as they do it. But one of the things I want to reemphasize is the fact about public benefits, but California recognized that housing is a huge public benefit, as is seen in SB 9. So, let's not just joke around. I mean, it's a big deal. Public benefits is a big deal, and housing has been thrown into the category of being a public benefit under SB 9. So if you can do it, do it. So especially for the larger projects, you should consider housing, especially when you've got mandates from Sacramento, the governor and the legislature saying build more housing, especially affordable housing. So I thought I'd give more of the You know, I've been a planner for going on 9 years now. I didn't want to get into the weeds with this because I thought Sean did a great job, Joe cleaned it up, and then I wanted to throw in the extra stuff about our tools as a planning commissioner. I've been using them for 9 years now, but we do have tools, and we have the opportunity to help our council and our staff. So I'm very excited about that part of it. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Great. Thank you to the three of you for working on this. Anthony or Highland, do we have anybody in the queue for public comment? Well, first we're getting public comment. You guys did your report, then we'll go back to commissioner discussion. We'll get it. Don't worry.
Thank
Anyhow.
you, Chair Stewart. I do have Sharice Hansen with her hand raised. I will go ahead and bring her up.
Perfect. Let's hear what Sharice has to say. Welcome, Sharice.
All right,
Hello.
Sharice, you are unmuted.
Hi, thank you, Anthony. Thank you, Planning Commission, for having me. My name is Sharice Hansen. I am on the Harbor Advisory Board with Sean as well. I'm a chamber board member and an Embarcadero Master Lease member of that group, EML. And I'm the 833 Embarcadero developer with the current project that has oodles of public benefit. I just want to say that I second continuing on and including more people, especially from the Harbor Advisory Board, seeing as a lot of public benefit tends to go into any project that's on the waterfront, and the waterfront is in dire need of improving. And so there are a lot of things that were on your list, and then there were a lot of things that weren't on the list that I would love to be a part of if you do choose to continue on with the committee. Also, I wanted to say that it's a great idea. I have a lot of people who have come thinking that they wanted to invest in Morro Bay and start a project, but they were so confused by all of the things that they were hearing because there wasn't really a clear path. So having a recipe of sorts with public benefits when they know that they want to do something that's not 100% in the Plan Morro Bay guidelines, I think that this would be a big asset to people who want to put money into our community. Did you hear that?
We heard it all, Sharice. Great comments, and you're within, you're under 2 minutes of time there, so good job.
Gotten pretty good at it. All my city council 3-minuters. So.
There you go. Yeah, we're back to our 3-minute stuff. Well, thank you so much for participating tonight.
All righty. Thank you.
Anthony, anybody else waiting for public comment?
Thank you, Chair Stewart. Currently, I do not see any raised hands left in the queue.
Great. So we will close public comment. So the way I reviewed the report and Sean's comments tonight, I feel like there are really 5 areas to discuss. The first one, which he kind of mentioned earlier in the report, was to discuss, for the Planning Commission to discuss if and when it wishes to receive recommendations and or engage in discussion on Vistra Energy project suggested benefits. So that, since we don't have a project at this point, is kind of, I think we can all assume that, yes, we will want to have input on that when there is a project to look at. I think that also opens the suggestion that with these larger projects that we have seen in our community, there often is early public engagement. In my experience, as we have looked at these things, there's almost always been either an applicant coming forward or an applicant encouraged to come forward and have different kinds of public forums and meetings. So I'm not sure, as we move down this list of when and how we encourage that kind of public engagement, that's something that needs to be on the city's project list of things to do. But we'll hit that later. Second thing was just the project size, whether we like that classification of under 7,500 square feet for small, 7,500 to 15,000 for medium, and over 15,000 for large. Then the public input opportunities, what we see as the most reasonable, efficient, cost-effective ways to do that, especially given that Council has given a mandate to facilitate that planning process to be quicker, easier for applicants, while still recognizing that everything has to be done appropriately for the community. The idea of proportionality and nexus, again, how do you determine when is it enough public benefit? I think that's going to be very subjective, and I think that's why it's still important that we have, these meetings, often more than one if it's a larger project, where we as a commission discuss that. And then, of course, there's always opportunity for public input, and generally it'll go to City Council as well, and they will have the opportunity to look at those things. And then finally, the review of the public benefits menu. What I would personally recommend for that menu, and I think it is a great starting point, we may be able to throw a few things in here right off the bat. Like I didn't see it maybe in here, undergrounding utilities. Could be a good one to throw in. I also wondered, especially on larger projects, whether if they dedicate an even larger open space area, to me that's a huge public benefit environmentally, as well as just creating those spaces. But I would like to see, personally, us suggest to each of the other committees and commissions and boards that they look at pulling together a public benefit as Harbor Advisory Board sees it, as even the Tourism Bureau sees it, as Public Works would see it, and Parks and Recreation. Is that?
So if the commission's interested in that, that would be a good discussion to have, because the only person that can, the only body that can direct that is the City Council.
City Council.
So you would, bring forward something that you're interested in doing that and making that suggestion to City Council, and then I would be at some point taking it forward to them and seeing if they are interested in having their advisory boards work on this, given this isn't part of the city's goals currently.
Right.
I mean, everything has to be, I bring that, you hear me say this a lot, but it's true. City has limited resources. The city went through an extensive goal-setting process, and those are the things that the City Council expects us to work on. I don't think they have any issue with the Planning Commission working on this subject, because it's exactly the things that you look at regularly. Right. They may not, be so interested in having some of the other advisory boards spend time on it, because they have other pieces of the goals that they're supposed to be working on right now. So I don't know that to be the case. They might be fine with it. They might not. I don't know. Or they might say, oh, this is something, that maybe we pick up next year for them, or something along those lines. I don't know. Okay. I do think it can be an iterative process. It can be something that's, worked on over time. I think the subcommittee members, mentioned that as well. I think it is something that could, continue over time. Like the list for sure. I think the list is valuable.
So another thing that occurred to me listening to all of this is some of what we always come up against is just education. So educating the people in our community how to find this information. How do they, and it's there. I think our city does an exceptional job of providing the resources, the links. The city manager does a monthly newsletter about all the projects in different, parts of the city administration. You can certainly get on the Notify Me for agenda items for any agendas and read the minutes afterwards. You can watch the things on TV, Zoom, whatever now. I do think perhaps the public could use some education, as we all got in, as becoming commissioners. what an agenda item that would trigger the need for a public benefit looks like. So the fact that it's on the agenda, that somebody's asking for a modification, means a public benefit may be considered at that point, right? Basically.
Yes, I mean, some of this is, interesting and probably larger discussion for the group, but the concept, the PD overlay is going away in the new zoning code. Mm-hmm. The PD overlay as constructed in the current zoning code is going away. There is a PD overlay in it, but it is a traditional PD overlay. It's basically an ordinance that you adopt, and it's for projects sizes that are over an acre, a half acre. And then they, again, involve multiple public hearings with Planning Commission and City Council for approval. But that piece of it's going away, so you won't have the use of it as much there. Where it's not being, this public benefit discussion will remain on the waterfront properties. Mm-hmm. It is part of the existing waterfront master plan and is required for you to, most often it's the properties that are going to 2 stories that need the extra public benefit. I think, certainly the menu of items is very relevant to that process, and is nice because I think, as Sean in the report indicates, one of the things that happens when staff talks with applicants that come forward for projects on the waterfront is we point to the previous projects that have most recently come, and recently there's been a lot. We've had several projects come forward, small ones like Gray's Inn, Rose's Landing, Harbor Walk Plaza, Sharice Hanson's project. And then going all the way down to the Measure D project that Bob Fowler built. So those are a lot of projects that have come recently. And they all had different components of public benefits that went with them. None of them are the same, and we usually point folks to those types of things and say, well, you can go look at these different size projects and see what they did, and we'll oftentimes give them the plans, the projects, the conditions of approval to allow people to do it. It's nice to have it in, like one. I mean, this is pretty great. There's 55 items on here. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And is a good starting point for folks so they can have, something in their hand to look at when they're thinking about a project. So.
Well, I know in talking with Kathy Novak, who facilitates a lot of development projects, she loved this idea that she would have something she could take to her clients and say, these are things that the city has looked at, is interested in, could be approved, and it would help get those projects going in a more streamlined fashion.
And Susan, I just wanted to recognize that part of the reason I made the comment about zoning is because I was aware that the PD overlay was going away. So what I was trying to say is with our new zoning guidelines, how would we continue to look at public benefits as part of that? So I kind of reflected on what Scott had told me in the past about PD overlay going away, but that doesn't mean we do not have a public benefits program as part of the new zoning, even though PD overlay won't be as significant, you know what I mean? It won't, Scott just said it, so we were aware of that. So we wanted to make sure public benefits didn't just not get recognized as part of the new zoning. That's it.
Okay, Asia, I'm going to give Asia an opportunity to comment, question, and then let's go to Bill, and then we can keep sort of roundtabling it here.
Just because we just talked about the menu of options, which is really great, and there's almost too many choices of things to invest in, but it doesn't necessarily help a developer or business owner know how much resources to put towards those projects. And so that's, I think, the harder task. It's not coming up with ideas of what can be done, but how much is it the responsibility of the person providing? How much are they investing in and doing?
So, Scott, do you have any response for that when you're helping a developer put together a project and, how do you help them
so that's
size that?
Yeah, that's what I was kind of getting at when I was just speaking to the topic. we really do sit down with the applicants and say, you know, like the good thing is, again, we've had a lot of projects that have come down on the waterfront, and that's usually where these things are at. There are other locations where you have planned development. We have the 61 lot subdivision on the Panorama site that we're having the meeting for tomorrow. But we look at these projects along the waterfront, and all of like those projects that I mentioned, they're all different sized projects. And so when you're doing a complete redo of your lease site, you know, an example would be the Libertine, because we're working with them right now. We say, oh, what you should look at is the project right next door. You know, but they have different opportunities there. You know, they are on the street end, so they might be able to add public benefit in the form of, you know, creating, you know, use in that street end as opposed to what it is right now, which is parking. So they have different opportunities just based on where they're located. But that's the conversation that we had with them. He said, you look at what was done next to you, your neighbor, and you can see all the public benefits that were included with that project, including, you know, a bunch of green improvements to the facilities of that project as well. And it gives you at least a scope and scale of something that was, one, that made it through the process. It gives you an idea of the types of things that are of interest to the community, to the Planning Commission, and to the City Council. And it's a good place to start. And then what the menu does, what I like about it is it's not just you look at next door and do what they did. It really is you can look at some of these things, get things that are roughly proportional, and you want to pick things, I would think, if you're the developer, that like enhance your project, that play off it. Just randomly saying, I'm going to provide a public bathroom, well, that might not do anything for your project, you know, but having the play area for the kids based on what your project's designed around, which Sharice's project is, you know, it's kind of designed to do that. Even the uses on the ground floor kind of play off of that space, and it was done purposefully. That's great. That's what you want to see them do. You don't want to just have them like spin the wheel and, you know, like point at something. You want them to be, you know, proposing something that makes the project better. You know, not just for the public, but for them as well. And that's kind of where we point people. I mean, that's the same thing that we've been doing, you know, in the discussions that we've had on the Market Plaza property is, you know, looking at the space adjacent to it, what could that be, and, you know, what does it make sense with in the context of the project itself, not just like you have to go do X and then you go build your project. You know, like that's not where we're at, and that doesn't make sense, and that doesn't really make projects better. So.
I'm not too sure if I still understand Nexus, but is that kind of like Nexus, Asia, what Scott just said about finding that sweet spot for the project?
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine as a developer not wanting to invest in the community, wanting to make your project better, but also they have to balance their spreadsheets, right? And they have to make the project viable. And on the other side of it, I think for us, you know, when thinking about the Libertine and how we can judge, is this enough public benefit or not, having some kind of marker or measurement, not that it has to be exact or the same every time, but so that we are making judgments fairly. You know, when I'm looking at the Libertine and saying this is or is not enough public benefit, I should probably make that judgment based off of what happened next door. And so from my perspective, I think it would be helpful to have that a little predefined without having to like stay within very tight parameters, I guess.
So I would like to get to Bill, who's probably chomping at the bit with all sorts of ideas and has been waiting patiently. Bill, have you got some comments, input?
How did you know I'd be all excited about this?
I just had this feeling.
Thank you, Susan. Can you guys hear me okay?
Absolutely, yes.
Great, thank you. And thanks, Scott, for setting this up. I really do appreciate it. You know, my takes on this is really a great fit for Morro Bay. And I think it's to the credit of the good job the committee did. The comments have been, I think, really strong and really provocative. You know, Joe's comments about the commensurate thing is probably key and even core. And so I think we're all going to have to work a little bit on that. Mike talks about this as a tool. I think it really is a great tool. Mike also talked about how this is, you know, ahead of many cities, and it is. I can tell you with certainty, this is light years ahead of Los Angeles. So I think that's all good news. Sharice's comments were really important too, because I do think there's benefit for someone looking to do a project. That's all good. What I would like to do is take the time from tonight to actually put my responses in writing. I think maybe all of us might want to do that. But I'd like to give you just a quick response of, I've got like a few points, but I'll start with the categories. I think we should look at a category that's not based on size. I think quite often the significance of the public, the importance of the public, the significance of the public importance of a project oftentimes makes it more key to this than even the size of the project. So I would think we might consider that and be able to define what kind of projects might do that, but certainly things that, are on Main Street or on the Harbor Walk, for example. I think a fifth category might also be based on the type of request. If you're asking for a height, modification, that's going to suggest maybe certain kind of public benefits we might want to look at. We do that already with some of our reviews, but I think putting it into the public benefit category could be a help and sort of interesting. The other thing I'd like to add is certainly one of the public benefits can be additional urban design and architecture. Libertine, might be an example of that, and I think many projects are. The third thing that I thought was really significant is the process. I'm really happy that the committee took it on. My sense is that we have to find a way to make that process fit our existing meeting schedules. I'm not so sure additional meetings is a smart thing to do, but I think making it very clear to staff and the applicant that there has to be time for the public benefit thing to happen is really, really good. And then finally, commensurate. I think whatever that is, we need more on that. We have to find a way to kind of, Joe's comment, to add a little more guidelines to what this could be. I'm happy to put all this in writing, and I hope other commissioners will as well. And I think, not is this just a great start, but it really, as Mike said, it could be a great, great tool. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Really great comments. Appreciate the thoughtfulness in that. I also was really interested in your suggesting that size may not be the most important thing, which we all know to be true. I could see, a very small project, but say it had deep historical significance to the community, and somebody's proposing to make massive alterations to that. For many of us, that might trigger, ooh, this is really important, and we may be losing something here that is, really special. So you would really have to provide some benefit for that loss.
Yeah, and I think, Susan, we can come up with categories or kind of conditions that make that somewhat clear. Mm-hmm. And certainly, preservation, what supports the fishing village story, is certainly one of those significant issues.
I absolutely agree with that. And one of the things that you mentioned, height, and thinking about the Libertine has always been 2 stories. But the fact that, they're doing a remodel now, the second story has become a liability that has to be mitigated somehow by extra public benefit, even though that second story historically has been there. So
but 2 things with Libertine, remember, is they're going over 50%, which right. means that they now need to comply with, the harbor guidelines, and the second story is not a certainty, right?
Right.
I'd really like to stop talking about the Libertine if that's possible.
Because it's not on the agenda.
Those are very specific comments on the thing. Thanks.
Right. As an example, there are 2-story buildings already on the Embarcadero, and they will be undergoing. There are more than one, that have to have remodels.
Susan, I had a question for Bill.
Sure, go ahead.
Hey, Bill, how you doing? This is Mike. Bill?
Hey, Mike.
Hey, on page 20, Bill, the subcommittee had made some recommendation on next steps, and I like your idea about giving the commissioners an opportunity to, write something up, digest and write up their comments. Would you include all of the 5 things there, or just whatever the commission wants to, the commissioners would like to chime in on?
Mike, I saw 4 things there.
No, it's on page 20.
Yeah, I got page 20, and it says 5 areas, but there's only 4 listed.
Okay, but Bill was mainly saying that he wants to be able to have the
Right.
opportunity to write.
Right.
Because we had our next step, so I'm just basing it on, all this stuff's in my mind, so I look at 5, I see 5. But, so Bill, you said something about providing feedback as a planning commissioner in writing, specifically related to, what did you say, Bill? That's where I lost you.
I'm having a hard time hearing you, Mike. You're a little too close to the mic, maybe. You're
Okay.
coming across
Is that
a little
better?
distorted.
Is that better?
But yeah, could you ask that one more time?
Yeah, is that better? Can you hear me better?
Much better, thank you.
Okay, so on page 20, the subcommittee had their next steps. Now, you made a recommendation that the planning commissioners be given the opportunity to provide written feedback. Would
Yes.
that include one or all of those next step items on page 20?
Yes, I think we should include them all and kind of get it all out there and then see, because I think you guys raised a lot of really strong points. What is commensurate? What is the process? What are the categories? And, what are the categories of benefit? And so I think if we all responded, we might begin to focus it a bit more. I don't see any reason why not to include it all over the next 2 weeks. And it might take longer to get back to another meeting on this, but this is a really important tool, as you pointed out. So I'd ask for as much feedback from the commissioners as we can get.
Yeah, and one of the last things we talked about is having 1 month. Joe and me talked about 1 month. Does that seem sufficient for the planning commission? Because we talked about that, literally just talked about that. We felt that
for
1
me,
month
I think a month is a good time. Yes,
Good.
I think that works. Yeah.
Good.
Okay. With the acknowledgement that we may not see it on an agenda, depending on what Scott has planned for us. And I would also at this point encourage, again, if anybody's listening out in the listening world, this is open to the public as well. You may share your ideas and thoughts on this with the commissioners or with Scott directly. Certainly anybody, I think, on the subcommittee, to funnel that through. We can't talk with each other about it. But I think, again, if our concern is getting enough public input, this is a time to do it. We're all available. So, Joe?
A couple of additional thoughts. I thought Bill's suggestion about other ways of classifying the projects, particularly like location or historical importance, I think that's a great idea. And we might not even have to get that specific if we simply include that in the document, which then alerts the applicant that, by the way, if he has a building that's in an historically significant part, he may be asked to do more than he would otherwise expect. With respect to the other Morro Bay committees, I have a feeling if we just send this report to them, we're going to get responses from people who are interested in the committee back to us, and we might not even need like a formal request that the individual committees take under consideration.
You need a formal request.
They just can't comment on our stuff. Oh, okay.
You need to get a formal. We need to get authorization through the city council.
Okay. Oh, I stand corrected on that. And then the third thing was that, again, with respect to these very large projects, which are really without precedent, I mean, you can't really, there's nothing really to compare them to accurately. When I was suggesting that we have some sort of scheduled updates, it was really, how do I put this? I have absolute confidence in the City Council and the Community Development Office and us. But I suspect that some of these very large entities behind these proposals, might have a tendency to sort of shove the notion of community benefits to the side in the notion of, well, let's get the big issues resolved first. I'd like to sort of put the authority of the Planning Commission to reinforce that of the City Council saying, no, you boys really do have to think serious about this and think about it early. And that's why I was suggesting those updates so we could sort of all get on the page.
I understand what you're saying. I will just say in my experience with the few really large projects that I'm aware of that are kind of in the pipeline potentially, these folks have actually done a really great job of public outreach, certainly in the business community. I think a lot of them actually care and recognize that in a small town, they're going to have to do that to get through the process without a lot of. So I may be too idealistic in that, and I agree that that communication needs to be continuous and ongoing. I will also say that, and I think Scott can speak to this, that there are project updates on the larger projects in the community on the city's website. Just navigate those pages and you can find them.
Yeah, it's interesting, and there's, I do, have some concerns with the report, related to the additional meetings that are suggested or the additional noticing, because we have statutory requirements under which we have to process applications. I have 30 days to review an application for completeness. Completeness just has to do with, does it have all of the components in our checklist for submittal? Once it's deemed complete, we have 60 days to take it to hearing unless there's an environmental document involved, at which point it adds 180 days. So adding hearings into the process is of concern to me. But normally what happens when you see significant projects, and that's what I wanted to touch on, is you see, like oftentimes when there's a project that has issues or we're a little concerned, like, you're asking for X, but you're only offering Y, you see it under conceptual review. And so that allows you some time to, to go over it. And you've seen several of these. With the 205 Harbor projects, the hotel project over on Atascadero Road did that. Again, we've had numerous projects where that's happening. You might have projects that involve larger planning processes, like Vistra. They're going to be doing a master plan. That's going to involve a bunch of engagement on that front. You're going to actually start, we're literally starting, I was going to be part of my comments, but I'll give them to you now because they're contextually related. Is when do we start hearing from them, right? And they've sort of been waiting for us to finalize the project description for the environmental impact report. Now they're going to start their public engagement sort of like campaign, like getting out there, going to public meetings. They're going to, I think, do a presentation on May 10th at the City Council meeting, on the next week with the Planning Commission. I think it's on the 19th of May. You're going to get a presentation from them in the beginning, just kind of having them touch base, talk to you about their project a little bit, talk to you about some of the things you might have heard of with their Moss Landing project, things like that. So they're starting that process, and we're working with them on the backside of what the overall permitting process is going to look like, and we're hopefully going to have a conversation either later this week or beginning of next to go over, meeting with the Coastal Commission to go over like what they expect to be in the master plan. So we all know where we're supposed to be, the concepts that are supposed to be discussed, things that they'd like to see in it, so we don't run them into a brick wall if we get them through our process. So again, big project, could be lots of opportunities, for input. And that's normally been the case here. We've not, had issues where we haven't had a lot of opportunity. Projects on the waterfront, that concept precise plan process that you have to go through is rigorous. You have to go to Planning Commission and City Council. You have to go to the Coastal Commission. Then you have to come back to Planning Commission. It's the concept precise plan process. That's a lot of opportunity for the public to weigh in. And I would say that we don't get a lot of desire, I think, maybe not a good word, but from the public to weigh in on the public benefit piece of the project. Usually what the public's interested in is, what is the project? What are the exceptions? it's not so much on the public benefit side of things. It's really just weighing in on the project itself. Is this a fit for the city? Is it good? What are they asking for? We don't want them to have a height exception, whatever it is. It's those things. We rarely get commentary, and I'm going to exclude our member in the audience there, related to public benefits component of projects. Sean Green, regular contributor. Thank you, Sean. To projects, but our commenter, but we don't usually get a lot from other public.
So that's where I wonder with the idea of educating the public that part of what happens when we give somebody an exception to height, for example, is that we are looking at a menu of public benefits that we and they will get in return.
Yeah.
So I think that they know that. Gee, look at the Planning Commission, just let another 30-foot building go up. Oh, my God. Well, no. In return for that, we got all the sidewalks in the downtown fixed.
Yeah.
I mean, that there hopefully would be some benefits, some trade-offs, and some reasons for doing those kinds of changes.
And in those circumstances, it behooves the developer to educate the public so that there's less resistance.
And for us to educate. I mean, we are here as the body that looks at these things, and I don't know how much the public tunes in. Tuesday night, there's probably something else on TV, but just to let them know somehow. Maybe even I could talk with Scott Collins in one of his upcoming newsletters to remind people. As part of the Planning Commission's process, when we approve a project that has some kind of exception in it, it's...
Dinner time.
Excuse me? It's because we're...
Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, a little background noise there.
I am late for my anniversary dinner, so I wonder...
Oh, no. We'll try and wrap it up. That we do consider additional above and beyond, whatever is required of a project applicant to do. We're considering more that they need to put in so it doesn't exist in a vacuum. And I think Scott Collins does a great job of communicating. I imagine all you department heads actually contribute to those things. So you do a great job of communicating those things. So, again, that's maybe just a little step we could take in letting the public know.
And Susan, the subcommittee did recognize that there would be triggers where things would happen that would engage the Planning Commission, right? It's like CEQA review. We had our first item, there was a CEQA review. We know on these larger projects there's going to be an environmental impact report. We know that there'll be more time, so we did talk about that. So, there will be triggers, so I agree with you, Scott, that we're going to have time, especially when you have to do these other things built into the process. So we did talk about that.
So are we about ready to wrap it up? Sure. I think what I'm hearing is that commissioners would pull together written responses to this suggested plan, to the menu. We would look at perhaps ways besides size that could help us categorize what the expectations would be on the public benefits. There's already something in the city process that triggers this, so I don't think we need to review that. But again, how we look at what's commensurate with what we're asking of an applicant for the project, different ways possibly that we could engage the community, make sure that they understand the process, hopefully without adding more time to the timeline of getting a project approved and reviewed.
And Susan, that's why I asked Bill if he was, I wanted him to refer to page 20 because those were our next steps. So if the commission could focus in on our next steps and what we wanted, if you could provide feedback in less than 30 days.
Right. So that gives us kind of those basic.
That way, because I was trying to remember, you're saying things that are, I want to make sure everybody understands that, that it's basically the report, the whole, and these items that were,
And then, Scott, it's been a while since I've watched a a city council meeting. Do you just have a time where you give a report on what your department is doing? I mean, would there be an opportunity at that point to say, the commission is reviewing public benefits and is interested in hearing in whether it would be appropriate to have the other boards and commissions add to that list?
It'd be great if I could get a motion and a second, and we could do a vote on that recommendation.
Okay.
So I could convey that information to the city council, and I have to agendize it.
Okay.
So it might not be at the next meeting, but
Okay.
Susan?
Yes, Mr. Roshan.
Sorry to interrupt. Can we wait till we get comments from commissioners on that item? I think that's a little premature to go to council with that request, and I'm not sure that that's been thought through all the way, because how we engage those different committees is important. I think we might very well be some sort of filter rather than a centerpiece. And I do agree with Scott's comments. This is our job, not theirs. So I think there's ways to get that transparency and get their input, but maybe not quite the way as described in the report. So I guess I would encourage us not to go that route just yet until we've had a chance to discuss it one more time.
And Bill, Bill, this is Mike. Can you make a motion, Bill? That way we could just, because I know what you want to do. So can you make a motion and try to get a second?
Yeah, I guess I would say that we all provide written comments, that we look to the minutes of this meeting, and hopefully, Scott, we can get a lot of these points covered in the minutes. And then we have one more meeting before we take any action relative to city council. That would be my motion.
And that would be 30 days, right, Bill?
Yes.
Okay. Do we have a second? Whoops.
Oh, I think that's a very reasonable request, so I would certainly second that.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion? Asia? No. I guess I could go along with that. I mean, I don't see the harm in asking the other boards or asking the council to ask the other boards to provide input on what they consider public benefits, just because I think we all think about things differently and have different information that we approach things with. And, we have a great list, but we may not have things on this list that somebody, say in Parks and Recreation, may think is actually super critical. We just don't really know about it. But that, I'm open. It's not anything that has to happen tomorrow. So
Yeah, and I was going to say that because I was going to ask Scott, and you feel we have time, right, Scott? We're not under any pressures, so we have the time.
no, and I think the commission needs to be comfortable where you're at with this, because maybe it's, and I don't want to speak for Vice Chair Roshan, but and maybe it's a little more of a guided process where you are asking for particular input from the other advisory boards, so they, one, don't spin their wheels, two, are able to provide valuable input versus shotgunning it in several different directions. And then we have to take that and sort of put it into something that makes sense. It'd be nice if it was a little more, tailored, I suppose. And it would be easier for, at least from my standpoint, to make useful. So I don't think that's a bad idea. We might have a much better idea, of that once we get comments back from
Yeah. Thank you, Scott. Well said. Thank you.
all right, so we have a motion and a second. No more discussion? All right, Scott?
Commissioner King,
Yeah, yes.
Commissioner Rodriguez,
Yes.
Commissioner Ingraffia,
Yes.
Vice Chair Roshan,
Yes.
Chairperson Stewart.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0. Thank you.
Go to dinner, Bill. Go to dinner.
Happy anniversary, Bill.
Thank you, guys.
All right, Planning Commissioner.
Thank you so much for including me. I appreciate
Oh,
it.
thank you, Bill, for being there. Have a good dinner.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Planning Commissioner, let the record show that Bill is signing off now. He's got his but there's still a quorum. Planning Commissioner comments, future agenda items. Anybody have any comments? Question, wayfinding signs? I hate to bring that up.
I know I don't know if we have them yet or not.
Okay.
There was supply chain issues with
Sure.
with the posts.
Yeah.
I'm not like we had the signs we could get fabricated. We couldn't get the posts,
Okay.
and so I don't know where that is. I will though I will find out, and I'll send an email to the commission to let you know what the status is. Because I actually am curious as well. I don't know if we've resolved the supply chain issue, or maybe we're just waiting for staff to move it forward, because there's been a lot of change and restaffing in our public works department. So that might also have resulted in a little bit of a delay. So I'll find out.
Great. And then one other question. You all may know that Grandma's Yogurt has closed and changed. She sold her business. And the new tenants, I don't think, have any plan to provide a public restroom, which leaves the downtown area, again, with no public restroom. So you'd either have to walk up to City Park or down to the waterfront. And business people hate to tell people to go somewhere else to get something that takes them totally away from their area. But also, for both locals and visitors, that's a big ask to go 4 or 5 blocks away for a basic amenity. So, as we move forward and as we look at public benefits and as we look at projects in the downtown, do we have any way of facilitating this? I know it's too much at this point for the city to put it together.
As it currently stands, we don't have really don't have really the ability. And then the other question is where we would put it.
Right.
There's we don't have property right in the center of downtown. We do have some property on the fringe of downtown, but that's still sending them kind of to far-flung places that are several blocks away from where they might otherwise be in the core. Otherwise, they're going to be using restrooms in the existing businesses that we have down there, and maybe that's facilitated by a couple of the new restaurants that are opening, and even by this property as well. It's going to remain a restaurant use. It kind of depends, I suppose. I mean, we have the Scout Coffee going to be going into B of A, assuming they start their tenant improvements at some point in the near future. Got a couple other businesses going into the downtown too that are food oriented and have bathrooms. So,
would that be something you could ask for if they're asking for exceptions on their projects, to say, open your doors?
yeah, potentially. I mean, ideally, we would have the city figure out a solution to it in the immediate downtown. The problem is we just don't own property in the immediate downtown. That's the issue. Because you can get bathroom solutions that are fairly inexpensive, and the modular ones that you kind of bring the utilities into the site, and you have electricity and plumbing and water, and you plop them down, and they're a few $100,000 to do that with, and there you go, you have one. But again, the issue is property and available property. So.
Interesting challenge. All right, so that'll be another discussion at another time. Anybody else have any?
Yeah, I just wanted to say something, Scott, that I'd be at the APA conference right now, but it's in San Diego. You never went to the conference when it was in your state because they focused on your state. I went to the one in New Orleans, Chicago, Denver, New York. I went to those, and Boston. And, I went to those because you got to see and talk to people. This would have been a 6-hour dinner conversation with drinks following, just on public benefits. That's the beauty of being able to go to a conference where you got a lot of people like you, planners, just trying to figure it out for their own city. So I just thought I'd share that with you. So I went to a lot of places, got a lot of information from a lot of people, and which helped me become a better planning commissioner.
Very cool.
Thank you.
All right, Joe?
I just wanted to comment on what a pleasure and how much fun it is to finally be meeting in person as a planning commission.
It's pretty cool. Pretty cool. Thank you, everybody, for being here. And Community Development Director comments.
I think, I mentioned that we are going to be getting that Vista presentation at the Planning Commission. It'll be at the front end of the meeting where we have presentations, and they'll speak to their project a little bit and probably speak to some of the issues and reasons for the difficulties they had at their facilities that are up in Moss Landing. They're going to do that at the City Council the week before. And then, again, we have at Del Mar Elementary, we do have the presentation and community engagement with the project applicant for the Panorama subdivision, the 61-lot subdivision. That's from 6 to 7 p.m. tomorrow.
Are any commissioners planning on going? Joe? Good, okay. I thought I would go.
We can call in.
I don't think there's no availability for remote access. It's not a city-sponsored event.
Okay.
This is the applicant.
Okay.
Was requested by me for them to do some public engagement, to get some input and to get to know the neighborhood up there, and to do outreach in that neighborhood. Just because of how the previous project for the tank demolition, which shouldn't have been controversial but ended up being very, went, and so we wanted them to do a better job with this. And they have different, that was different people associated with the project itself moving forward. The same owners are there now, but they have RRM helping them out with, and they tend to do a fairly good job on outreach and.
So will they
listening to
be
the public.
facilitating? Or
Yeah, it's all on them. I mean, I will be there. Nancy Hubbard, the project planner, will also be there. But that'll really just be to answer questions that they come up from the city, for the city, like what's the process, what are we doing, how long is it going to take, that type of thing. But
In the time and place, Scott, again, one more time. It looks like I'm going to stay another day.
it's
just to go there.
Del Mar Elementary, and it's from 6 to 7 p.m. Tomorrow.
Sounds like a plan.
You'll see crowds.
On what is that, May 10th? Okay.
Thank you so much, and welcome back, everybody.
Yeah.
All right, have a good night. Thanks, Anthony and Highland.
Thank you. Have a great evening.